Hello and welcome to this edition of China Bao. We are meeting at a time when nations in Asia are redrawing their borders, are remaking their borders, they are redrawing their maps to include parts which are beyond their known borders. Such an exercise usually puts a huge burden on the future generations, future governments. It has a huge impact on the international relations of countries, and we shall see how. So the topic for our discussion today is the politics of memory and map making in China. So let's start with what we already know about China. China, since the ancient millennia, really saw itself as the Middle Kingdom, that it was the center of civilization. Its dealings with other nations around it were governed really by the Tianxia concept, wherein China was the center of civilization and it had a center tributary kind of relationships with countries that were surrounding it. Now, these countries were considered to be vassal states, to be full of barbarians. However, in the 19th century and the 18th century saw the rise of Europe, the rise of Japan. These two were able to wean away many of the tributary states of China. So you saw Taiwan, Korea, Vietnam being weaned away from the Chinese sphere of influence. Now this really psychologically damaged China, and it led to a lot of introspection and soul searching in China. So one of the reasons that were opined by many scholars was that since many dynasties had ruled China, this was an impediment to national sentiment, to the feeling of a belonging. For example, China didn't have a name. So the Hindi name for China was Qin. Now this is named after, this comes from the whole Qin dynasty of China. So many of the nationalistic scholars really opined that it didn't have a name, it didn't have a common language, and it didn't have a common history that would bind its peoples. So in short, there was very little people connect. And why was that so? Because many people perceived the nation as belonging to a dynasty, because it was ruled by a king, by an emperor, by a heavenly emperor who had the mandate of the heaven. He was the son of heaven. They wanted this nation to belong to people as a public property and not as a private property of any dynasty or any emperor. They said that it is only when you can build a nation, you can mobilize people, and you can resist the external colonization. Now, at that point of time, there was a different narrative that was taking shape in China, which was being scripted by a lot of scholars of the nationalistic bent of mind. Now, they said that the problem with China was that at one point of time, there was external colonization, there was a threat of external colonization, and there was an internal colonization. Now, China at that point of time was ruled by the Qing dynasty, which was a Manchu dynasty. It had taken power from a Han dynasty. Now, the Hans are really the majority of China. Now, these scholars really opined that the Qing dynasty was responsible for the decline of China, and that it had lost its territories because the West was able to extract unequal treaties, was able to push unequal treaties. For example, after the Opium War in 1840 and 1860 again, after the Second Opium War, many areas in China, the jurisdiction of the Chinese government did not run. These were under the jurisdiction of different Western powers. China had to part away with Hong Kong and Macau to the British and the Portuguese governments. And many of these scholars really saw that the solution to this was that the nation had to reinvent itself as a nation state with a new people and a new history. The Qing dynasty was dismantled it was the last dynasty to rule China between 1911 and 1912. The Qing had to abdicate power, and the Republican China took a form of a republic under Dr. Sun Yat-sen. Now, when it took the form of a republic under Sun Yat-sen, Dr. Sun Yat-sen, the narrative that was shaping in China was that China had to recover its lost territories, and that this responsibility really lay with future generations to recover this territory. The future governments would also be judged by the kind of efforts they put in recovering these territories. You had a nationalist leader like Chiang Kai-shek, who used to write the words, the Chinese characters Shui Qi, meaning avenge humiliation, in his diary for 20 years. Every day he would write these two characters, and this would remind him that he had a mission to accomplish. Now, in this background, in 1938, you had the Ministry of Internal Affairs putting out a map. It was called the Map of Shame. Now, this map really covered areas under Tianxia. I mean, these were the areas to be recovered, and this was China trying to assert its rights on areas which it felt its sway ran at some point of time. Now, these areas that cover large parts of Asia and are in different countries. For example, the map of shame that you can see on your screens now covers Korea, Mongolia, parts of Siberia, portions of the Indian subcontinent, the Nicobar Islands, Burma, the Malay Peninsula, Taiwan, Singapore, and almost the entirety of the South China Sea. Now, this issue lay dormant for many years. However, in the 90s, there were certain triggers that led to this issue coming out in the open. So in the late 90s, you had Hong Kong and Macau being handed over back to China. This led to a huge revival. I mean, this was seen as the first step in trying to regain the lost territories. Again, in the mid 90s, you had what China started was a patriotic education campaign, which encompassed the kindergarten, middle school, and up to the university level, where Chinese youngsters, Chinese youth, Chinese students would be told about the kind of sacrifices that their ancestors, their predecessors had made to secure the republic, to secure this nation. Another event that happened, another incident that happened was since 2001, China has been commemorating a day called as it has been marking this day called the National Defense Education Day. It usually is observed on the third Saturday of September. And given this background, you have people visiting different sites of historical importance. Usually this entire exercise was kicked off with youngsters visiting the Yuan Ming Palace, also called as the Old Summer Palace, which was ransacked and burned down by the French and British soldiers in 1860s. And the recurrent theme is that as a humiliated nation, China has had to recover these territories. Now, it's been about 25 years that patriotic education, and about 20 years that the National Defense Education Day has been commemorated, and this has really this has had a marked bearing on the psyche of many young Chinese, because it's been about 25 years, including the leadership of China, because let's remember that the average age of Chinese is about of a Chinese is about 38 years. So this has led to a huge generation of youngsters who feel that China has to make efforts to get back its territories. So post the 2000s, there have been protests, there have been pressure on the government to recover many of the territories. The government, under which was also influenced by Deng Xiaoping, said that these territorial disputes could be settled, or we can look at these territorial disputes some other day, and the nation needs to concentrate on really building its economy, building its reserves. However, today China is governed by Xi Jinping, and who talks about the rejuvenation of China, who talks about the strong nation dream, who talks about a strong China. Now, the problem is that when you have a strong nation, you have people, or you have a sentiment which wants to basically right the wrongs of the past, which wants to rid the burdens of the past. And when you talk about a nation, you have to have yourself, your people, your army to reassert your boundaries. And this is perhaps what has led to the rise, or the rising footprint of China in Asia. So I leave you with this thought, and do follow China Pow, and thank you for watching me.